Welcome back to CIA Declassified. The air in the city is a cold, damp mixture of coal smoke and the lingering scent of damp plaster. It is 1954, and the Iron Curtain is no longer just a metaphor. It is a physical reality of checkpoints, barbed wire, and suspicious eyes. In the Rudow district of West Berlin, a nondescript warehouse hums with activity, ostensibly a radar station, but its true purpose lies hundreds of feet below the surface. To understand the audacity of this moment, one must realize the surface of Berlin as a jagged scab of history. Above ground, the death strip is a wasteland of raked sand and landmines where the silence is only broken by the occasional bark of a guard dog or the grinding gears of a Soviet ZIS truck. But beneath this scarred crust, the earth is a labyrinth of forgotten subway tunnels, sewers, and bunker complexes. A dark, silent world where the only borders are the ones you build out of steel and timber. The men working in the Rudow shaft operated in a state of sensory paradox. The deafening roar of the heavy-duty digging equipment was muffled by layers of sound-dampening foam, while the subterranean heat was fought back by massive groaning refrigeration units. They were literal ghosts in the machinery, moving tons of Berliner mutter in the dead of night, knowing that a single misplaced vibration could alert a Soviet sentry standing just 20 feet above their heads. This was a war of centimeters, played out in the claustrophobic darkness of a pressurized tube where the sweat of an engineer was the only lubricant for the gears of high-stakes espionage. The Cold War had moved into the earth itself. Imagine the claustrophobia of a steel-lined tunnel, barely large enough for two men to pass, stretching nearly 1,500 feet into the enemy territory. The walls are lined with copper taps and massive reels of magnetic tape capturing the whispered secrets of the Soviet high command. This was the neurological tap into the Soviet war machine. While the world fretted over the possibility of nuclear fire, a handful of subterranean spies sat in the silence of the Berlin mud, listening to the static heavy voices of the Red Army. It was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering, a moment where the agency believed they had finally achieved the total ear. How did the operation get its name? The CIA chose Operation Stopwatch as a reflection of the intense time sensitivity of the project. Every day the tunnel remained undetected was a ticking clock of intelligence gain. Interestingly, the British counterpart, MI6, used the name Operation Gold, a literal nod to the mother lode of intelligence they expected to unearth. The dual naming system reflected the two nations' different approaches. The Americans focused on the urgency, the British on the value of the ore. We are surfacing the facts from the Berlin bore. Operation Stopwatch was a joint mission between the CIA and the MI6. The tunnel ran from the American sector in Rudow to the Soviet sector in Altglinica, Altglinicke. Construction began in September 1954. The tunnel was approximately 1,476 feet. It targeted the underground telephone cables of the Soviet military headquarters. The cables were only 27 inches below a busy road. Over 440,000 conversations were recorded. The operation processed over 40,000 hours of telephone traffic. Records show the tunnel cost roughly $6.7 million at the time. The Soviets accidentally discovered the tunnel in April 1956. Documentation reveals that the KGB knew about the tunnel before ground was even broken. The leak came from George Blake, a high-ranking MI6 officer and a Soviet mole. The Soviets allowed the tunnel to operate for 11 months to protect Blake's identity. The CIA used heavy refrigeration units to keep the tunnel from melting the snow on the surface. MI6 provided the specialized pressure taps to intercept signals without cutting lines. The operation produced over 1,700 intelligence reports. The project proved that dry air was necessary to prevent signal degradation. The warehouse used a used as a cover was built to resemble an Air Force supply depot. Documentation confirms the use of acoustic isolation booths for the listeners. The tunnel diameter was exactly 6 feet. Engineers used 125 tons of steel liner. The project required the removal of 3,100 tons of earth. The Soviet cables contained 172 separate circuits. Western intelligence intercepted 6 million feet of magnetic tape. The recording equipment was provided by the Ampex Corporation. Soviet soldiers initially believed the tunnel was a capitalist subway attempt. The tunnel was equipped with a heavy steel door to prevent Soviet entry in case of discovery. George Blake attended the initial planning meeting in London in 1953. The CIA used a false wall in the warehouse to hide the vertical shaft entrance. The tunnel had a dedicated sump pump to prevent flooding from Berlin's high water table. Soviet military traffic was encrypted, but the taps caught clear voice internal calls. The project utilized the first high-capacity voice recorders of the era. The operation used a specialized team of 150 analysts in Washington. The British nicknamed it the Project Operation Gold. The tunnel floor was covered in rubber matting to silence footsteps. CIA Director Alan Dulles personally approved the project. The project provided early warning of Soviet troop movements in Poland. Soviet officials held a press conference inside the tunnel after the discovery. The agency used nitrogen pressurization to keep moisture out of the tap head. The tunnel's air was exchanged every 10 minutes. Operation Prince was the code name for the initial technical feasibility study. The tunnel structure was designed to withstand the weight of heavy Soviet tanks passing above. The CIA created fake work schedules for soldiers in the warehouse cover. Over 50,000 reels of tape were shipped back to the U.S. The discovery was timed by the Soviets to coincide with a diplomatic visit. The tunnel intercepted the private lines of the Soviet Ministry of Defense. The project proved that the Soviets relied heavily on underground landlines for security. The tunnel was destroyed by the Soviets using demolition charges in late 1956. Western intelligence identified 2,900 Soviet personnel from the recordings. The operation was considered the greatest intelligence coup of the 1950s. The copper taps were hand-soldered to ensure no signal leakage. The tunnel cost approximately $80 million in today's inflation-adjusted currency. The CIA used geophones to monitor Soviet activity directly above the tunnel. The tunnel was the first major joint technical operation between the CIA and MI6. The warehouse cover was so convincing that local Berliners complained about the noise of radar. The vertical shaft was 20 feet deep before the horizontal digging began. Tunneling progressed at a rate of roughly 15 feet per day. The excavated dirt was stored in crates labeled as electronic equipment to avoid suspicion. Scientists used spectrographic analysis to identify specific voices on the tape. The tunnel was kept at a constant temperature of 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Soviet soldiers found the tunnel because of a heavy rainstorm that caused the soil to settle. The tap head was located directly beneath the Schönefelder Chaussee Road, Schoneffelder space Chaussee. The British developed a silent drill specifically for this operation. Analysts in Washington worked in a secure facility known as the Vint Hill Farm Station. The operation was codenamed PB Jointly within the CIA. Most of the intercepted calls were from the Soviet Air Force headquarters. The Soviets allegedly placed a sign in the tunnel after discovery mocking the Americans. Western intelligence learned about the Soviet Berlin command structure in minute detail. The tunnel used a sophisticated intercom system for internal communication among engineers. The project mapped the entire Soviet underground cable network in East Berlin. High-ranking Soviet generals were caught complaining about cold rations and fuel shortages. The CIA used inert gas enclosures to prevent oxygen from corroding the delicate copper taps. The operation produced a weekly summary report for the National Security Council. The British MI6 team was led by the legendary Peter Lunn. The tunnel's steel liners were made in segments to fit through the warehouse doors. Soviet soldiers vandalized the recording equipment before hauling it away. The CIA recorded the sound of Soviet tanks to determine their weight and armor thickness. The Translation Bureau included native Russian and German speakers recruited from refugee camps. The operation detected a Soviet security drill that simulated a Western invasion. The project provided the first evidence of Soviet nuclear stockpile movements in East Germany. The tunnel's lighting system was dimmed to prevent any light leaks from air vents. The project proved that even the KGB used unencrypted lines for routine administrative calls. The CIA utilized vibration sensors to detect if anyone was digging a counter tunnel. The tunnel was a time capsule of 1950s Soviet military culture. The last tape was removed only minutes before the Soviets breached the steel door. The operation influenced the U.S. position during the Geneva Conference. The steel liner segments were bolted together with high tensile strength fasteners. The project engineers used specialized shielding paint to reduce electromagnetic emissions. Soviet counterintelligence monitored the warehouse for months but failed to identify the digging. The tunnel's tap room was designed to be soundproofed against surface traffic. A specialized dehumidification system prevented condensation from shorting the electronics. Western analysts used the tapes to identify the burn rate of Soviet jet engines. The CIA installed thermal sensors to monitor the ground temperature above the tunnel. The British team used borescopes to visually inspect the cables before tapping. The operation revealed a power struggle within the East German leadership. The tunnel's power supply was redundant, using both local grid and diesel generators. Soviet officials were embarrassed by the technical sophistication of the tap. The project provided the first real-time look at Soviet air defense response times. The tape couriers used specialized secure canisters to transport the reels to the U.S. The tunnel was the largest clandestine engineering project in Berlin's history. The CIA developed custom solder to ensure a permanent connection to the Soviet wires. The operation's termination was a controlled withdrawal rather than a chaotic fight. A quote from a declassified CIA post-mortem report dated 1956. The project was a magnificent technical success, proving that the most secure Soviet communications could be breached by Western engineering. Quote from a declassified intelligence assessment dated 1955, the tunnel provided a unique window into the daily life and strategic anxieties of the Soviet military establishment in East Germany. Quote from MI6, an internal memo that's been declassified dated May 1956. Despite the unfortunate compromise by a hostile agent, the data harvested from the tap will serve our analysts for a decade. Quote from a declassified CIA Office of Current Intelligence memo dated 1956. The discovery of the Berlin Tunnel by Soviet forces was handled by them with a maximum of propaganda and a minimum of tactical surprise. Quote from Alan Dulles. This is declassified remarks he made internally. Operation Gold was a brilliant adventure in technical espionage that yielded a treasure trove of signals intelligence. Quote from a KGB internal directive that was apparently declassified. It's dated 1956, and it says in parentheses, translated. We must assume that every word spoken on those lines for the last year is now in the hands of the Americans. Quote from a declassified CIA technical review dated 1957, the tunnel stands as a monument to the lengths our agencies will go to penetrate the silence of the Iron Curtain. Despite the tunnel being public knowledge since 1956, the file on George Blake communication logs remains under heavy lock and key. It is estimated that over 250 pages are completely missing or heavily redacted. These documents utilize FOIA Exemption B1, protecting national defense secrets, and Exemption B3, which protects the identities of the intelligence sources. What is hidden in that black ink? I suspect it contains the operational vulnerability audit, which likely details exactly how many other joint operations Blake compromised. I also believe the redactions hide the Soviet disinformation assessment, the agency's internal investigation into whether the Soviets fed them fake intelligence through the tapped wires for nearly a year. I suspect the pages cover the retaliation protocols, the clandestine actions taken against Soviet assets once the betrayal was confirmed. Where the history ends, the subterranean rumors begin. There's a theory called the double blind theory. Conspiracy enthusiasts believe that the CIA actually knew Blake was a mole and used the tunnel to feed false secrets back to the Soviets, turning the tunnel into a triple cross machine. This would mean the entire operation was a theatrical performance for an audience in Moscow, suggesting that every recording was a scripted lie designed to confuse. The structural sabotage speculation is also fairly common. Some believe the tunnel was used to place seismic sensors near Soviet nuclear silos, and that the phone tap was merely a cover for monitoring underground vibrations. This suggests the project was actually about nuclear detection rather than eavesdropping, indicating a much deeper military objective than simple wiretapping. Then there's the Blake was a triple agent theory. That one's my favorite. It's a persistent fringe theory which suggests that George Blake was actually working for the Americans to feed the Soviets modified truths, and his exposure was a carefully managed exit strategy. This theory hinges on the idea that the Soviets gained nothing but useless data for 11 months while believing they had the ultimate mole inside MI6. And then there's the hidden vault conspiracy. It's a theory that the tunnel actually went further than the Soviet cables, leading to a secret underground Stasi vault that the Western agencies never admitted to finding. This theory claims that the most sensitive data, files on Soviet biological weapons, was retrieved before the tunnel was discovered by the Red Army. Was Operation Stopwatch a success? Tactically, it was a phantasmagoric triumph. Despite the leak, the quantity and quality of the raw data was unprecedented and set a new standard for field collection that remained unchallenged for decades. It provided a deep dive into the Soviet military's logistical headaches, their internal disputes, and their technical limitations in ways that human agents never could. Even if some data was tainted by disinformation, the sheer volume of human intelligence and signals intelligence allowed the West to build a psychological profile of the Soviet military that was worth every cent and every risk taken during the construction. Strategically, it was a compromised victory. The betrayal by George Blake cast a long shadow over the project's legacy and poisoned the relationship between U.S. and British intelligence for years to come. However, it was a strategic win in demonstrating the feasibility of hardline tapping on a massive scale against a fortified enemy. It proved that no cable, no matter how deep or how guarded, was safe from a sufficiently determined engineering team. It forced the Soviets to spend millions hardening their communications, a cost that helped bleed their economy during the mid-50s and shifted the balance of the early Cold War in the West's favor. As far as operational and technological breakthroughs go, Stopwatch led to a few, like hardline signal processing. The techniques developed to clean the audio from the noisy underground copper cables in Berlin became the foundation for modern signal processing used in telecommunications today. This allows your smartphone to filter out background noise and maintain a clear connection, even in crowded environments. The military uses these refined algorithms for secure undersea cabling, ensuring that communications between naval vessels remain interference-free. The intelligence community utilizes this legacy in passive acoustic monitoring, allowing them to isolate specific voices in a sea of electronic clutter. Then there's subterranean engineering and shielding. The Berlin Boar required pioneering methods to keep a tunnel secret, including thermal shielding to prevent heat from the tunnel's electronics from reaching the surface. Today, these thermal management technologies are used in the construction of underground data centers and bunkers to prevent detection by infrared satellite sensors. The military applies these shielding techniques to mobile command posts, making them invisible to enemy thermal imaging drones. In civilian society, these methods are used to improve the efficiency of geothermal energy systems, keeping heat contained within the pipes. Clandestine audio surveillance taps. The development of non-intrusive pressure taps meant the agency could listen to a wire without stripping the insulation or causing a voltage drop that would alert the owner. This technology evolved into the inductive couplers used by network technicians today to troubleshoot fiber optic and copper lines without disrupting service. The intelligence community uses advanced versions of these taps for fiber optic interception, while the military employs them for battlefield intelligence gathering, allowing them to tap into enemy field lines without leaving a trace of their presence. And of course, mass data translation and analysis. The sheer volume of recordings from Operation Stopwatch forced the CIA to develop the world's first systematic approach to bulk data analysis. This laid the groundwork for the modern data mining algorithms used by companies like Google and Amazon to process billions of search queries every day. The intelligence community uses these evolved natural language processing tools to scan global communications for keywords related to terrorism. The military applies this to electronic warfare, where computers must instantly translate and categorize thousands of enemy radio signals to identify potential threats in real time. The legacy of Operation Stopwatch is the end of physical privacy. It taught the world that the ground beneath our feet is not a barrier, but a conductor for the secrets of states and individuals alike. In the decades since the Berlin Tunnel was collapsed and filled with Soviet concrete, the principles of the Berlin bore have migrated from the soil to the silicon. We have transitioned from tapping copper wires in the mud to tapping the glass backbones of the internet, but the fundamental desire remains the same: to listen to the heartbeat of the world without the world knowing we are there. The ghost of the tunnel lives on in every fiber optic tap and every satellite downlink, a testament to our eternal struggle to turn the invisible into the information. As we look back at the warehouse in Rudo, we must see it not as a relic of the past, but as the blueprint for the present. The warehouse cover has simply become a shell company, and the subterranean spy has become the remote exploit. We are still digging, still tapping, and still hoping that the person on the other end of the line doesn't know we are holding our breath, waiting for the next secret to fall. In a digital conflict, remember that every hard line is a potential open door. The most dangerous leak is never the one in the pipe, but the one in the office. To protect a secret, you must harden the environment, not just the message. And remember, the earth has ears. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we investigate Triton, a specialized exploit designed to compromise and control Mac operating system-based systems. We'll look at the zero-day vulnerabilities, the kernel-level access, and the terrifying moment the world realized that even the most secure walled garden could be turned into a digital panopticon. Join us next time for The Glass Apple. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.